The summer evening was hot and sticky. Dr. Maya Thompson was driving home after a very long day at the hospital. She had been working for 16 hours straight, performing surgeries and saving lives. Her body ached with tiredness, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep in her own bed. Maya was driving her black Mercedes carefully through the quiet streets. She always followed the traffic rules. As a doctor, she understood how important safety was. But tonight she noticed red and blue lights flashing in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank. She hadn't done anything wrong, or at least she didn't think so. She pulled her car to the side of the road and waited. Officer Derek Sullivan stepped out of his patrol car and walked slowly toward her vehicle. He was a large man with cold eyes and a hard expression on his face. Maya rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where he could see them. She had learned to do this a long time ago. "Good evening, officer," Maya said politely. "Is there a problem?" Sullivan looked at her car, then at her. His eyes were filled with suspicion. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked in a harsh voice. "No, sir. I don't believe I was speeding or breaking any laws," Maya replied calmly, though her heart was beating fast. "Your tail light is out," Sullivan said, though Maya knew this wasn't true. She had just had her car serviced 2 days ago. "Everything was working perfectly. I'm sorry, officer. I wasn't aware of that. I'll get it fixed first thing tomorrow," Maya said, trying to keep the conversation simple and short. But Sullivan wasn't done. He leaned closer to her window and looked inside her car. "This is a pretty expensive car," he said slowly. "How does someone like you afford a car like this?" Maya felt her stomach tighten. She knew exactly what he meant by someone like you. She had faced this kind of treatment before, but it never got easier. "I'm a doctor, sir. I work at Memorial Hospital," Maya explained, keeping her voice steady and respectful. Sullivan laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was mean and mocking. "A doctor, really? You expect me to believe that?" He shook his head. "Let me see your license and registration." Maya reached slowly for her purse, making sure to move carefully so the officer wouldn't get nervous. She pulled out her wallet and handed him her driver's license. Then she opened her glove compartment and took out her car registration papers. Sullivan grabbed the documents from her hand and studied them under his flashlight. He looked at her medical license, which was clearly visible in her wallet. But instead of apologizing or letting her go, he became even more aggressive. "This could be fake," he said, holding up her medical license. "Anyone can make fake IDs these days. You probably bought this off the internet." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Officer, I assure you that everything is real. You can call the hospital if you need to verify my identity. I've been working there for 8 years. Don't tell me what I can or cannot do." Sullivan snapped back. "Step out of the car. I need to search your vehicle." "Search my car? On what grounds?" Maya asked, trying to stay calm even though anger was building inside her. "I have reasonable suspicion that you might be involved in illegal activity," Sullivan said with a smirk. "Now step out of the car before I arrest you for not cooperating with a police officer." Maya knew her rights. She knew this was wrong, but she also knew that arguing with this officer could make things much worse. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of her car. The evening air felt cool against her skin after sitting in the air-conditioned car. Sullivan made her stand on the sidewalk while he searched through her vehicle. He opened her trunk, looked under her seats, and went through her belongings. Maya watched in silence, her hands shaking slightly. She was angry, hurt, and humiliated. Other cars drove past, and people stared at her standing there like she was a criminal. After 15 minutes of searching and finding nothing, Sullivan finally walked back to her. "You're lucky tonight," he said. "But let me give you some advice. People like you don't belong in neighborhoods like this, driving cars like that. It makes people suspicious. Maybe you should think about that." Maya felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of this man. "May I go now, officer?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Sullivan said. He went back to his patrol car and sat there for another 10 minutes, making her wait. Finally, he returned with a ticket in his hand. "Here's a citation for that broken taillight," he said, handing her the paper. "Get it fixed or next time you won't be so lucky." Maya took the ticket without saying a word. She got back in her car, started the engine, and drove away slowly. As she drove, her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. She had spent her whole life working hard, studying, and becoming a doctor. She had dedicated her life to helping people, to saving lives. And yet here she was, treated like a criminal on the street just because of the color of her skin. When Maya finally got home, she sat in her car in the driveway for a long time. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Officer Sullivan's face, his cruel words, and his mocking laugh kept playing in her mind. She thought about filing a complaint, but she had heard so many stories of complaints going nowhere. People like Sullivan seemed to get away with this behavior all the time. Finally, Maya went inside her house. She took off her shoes and sat on her couch in the dark. She was too tired and too upset to eat or shower. All she could think about was the injustice of it all. She had done nothing wrong, yet she had been treated with such disrespect and hatred. But Maya was strong. She had faced challenges and discrimination before, and she had always risen above them. She wouldn't let this officer break her spirit. Tomorrow she would go back to the hospital and continue doing what she did best, saving lives and helping people. That was who she was, and no one could take that away from her. As she finally climbed into bed that night, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She would not let hatred and prejudice change who she was. She would continue to be kind, professional, and dedicated to her work. Because that was what really mattered, not the opinions of small-minded people like Officer Sullivan, but the lives she touched and the difference she made in the world every single day. Officer Derek Sullivan had been working for the police department for 12 long years. To some people, he looked like a dedicated officer who took his job seriously. But the truth was very different. Behind his badge and uniform, Sullivan carried deep prejudices that affected how he treated people every single day. This wasn't the first time Sullivan had treated someone badly because of their skin color. In fact, his record was full of complaints from citizens who felt they had been treated unfairly. There were reports from families who had been stopped for no good reason. There were stories of young men who had been searched roughly on the street. There were accounts of women who had been spoken to with disrespect and cruelty. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly black woman, had filed a complaint 2 years ago. She had been stopped while walking home from church one Sunday morning. Sullivan had demanded to know where she was going, and had suggested she was in the wrong neighborhood. He had made her empty her purse on the sidewalk in front of everyone. She had been so humiliated that she cried for days afterward. Then there was the Rodriguez family. They had been driving home from their daughter's birthday party when Sullivan pulled them over. He had accused them of stealing the gifts in their car, saying they looked too expensive for people like them. He had made the whole family get out of the car in the rain while he searched their vehicle. The children had been scared and crying. There were at least 15 official complaints against Sullivan in his file. But somehow nothing ever really happened to him. Each time someone complained, there would be an investigation. People from the Internal Affairs Department would ask questions and write reports. But in the end, Sullivan would get a slap on the wrist and continue working as if nothing had happened. Once he was suspended for 3 days without pay. Another time he had to attend a sensitivity training program, but Sullivan didn't take any of it seriously. In the locker room at the police station, he would joke about the training. He would laugh and say it was all nonsense, just the department trying to look good for the public. His fellow officers knew what kind of person Sullivan was. In the break room, he would make racist jokes and comments. He would talk about certain neighborhoods as if everyone who lived there was a criminal. He would use ugly words to describe people who didn't look like him. Some officers would laugh uncomfortably and say nothing. Others would walk away, not wanting to be part of his hateful talk. Sullivan's partner, Officer Mike Chen, had finally requested a transfer 6 months ago. Mike couldn't take it anymore. He had joined the police force to help people and make his community safer. But working with Sullivan made him feel dirty and ashamed. Mike had seen how Sullivan treated people during traffic stops. He had watched Sullivan be unnecessarily rough with suspects who weren't resisting. He had heard the cruel things Sullivan said when they were alone in the patrol car. Mike had tried to talk to Sullivan about it once. "Man, you can't treat people like that," Mike had said after watching Sullivan humiliate a teenager during a routine stop. That kid didn't do anything wrong, but Sullivan had just laughed. "You're too soft, Chen. This is how you keep control. You show them who's boss or they'll walk all over you." After that conversation, Mike knew he couldn't change Sullivan's mind. He put in for a transfer and was relieved when it was approved. He now worked in a different district and was much happier. The problem was bigger than just Sullivan's behavior on the streets. He truly believed his prejudices were justified. He would spend hours looking at crime statistics, cherry-picking numbers that seemed to support his worldview. He would ignore all the data that showed poverty and lack of opportunity were the real problems. He would ignore the fact that most people in every community were good, honest, and hard-working. Sullivan had grown up in a household where such views were common. His father had been the same way, always complaining about how the country was changing, always blaming others for his own problems. Sullivan had learned these attitudes from a young age, and they had become part of who he was. At family gatherings, Sullivan would dominate the conversation with his opinions. His sister had stopped inviting him to her house because he would say offensive things in front of her children. His brother had tried to challenge him several times, but Sullivan would just get angry and defensive. "You don't understand because you don't work on the streets like I do," Sullivan would say. "You don't see what I see every day." But what Sullivan refused to see was his own role in creating negative interactions. He approached certain people with suspicion and hostility from the very beginning. He expected trouble, so he often created it. His prejudices became self-fulfilling prophecies. The police department knew they had a problem with Sullivan. The chief of police had reviewed his file more than once. But Sullivan was careful. He never used racial slurs in his official reports. He always had some technical reason for his stops and searches. He knew how to work the system just enough to avoid serious consequences. There were also political considerations. Sullivan had connections in the community. Some local politicians supported him because he was tough on crime. Some residents in certain neighborhoods liked him because he made them feel safe, even though that safety came at the expense of others being treated unfairly. The union also protected Sullivan. Whenever there was a complaint, the union representative would be there to defend him. They would argue that Sullivan was just doing his job in a difficult environment. They would say that split-second decisions on the street were hard to judge from a comfortable office. They would point to his years of service and his arrest record, so Sullivan continued to work year after year. He became more confident that he was untouchable. He believed the badge gave him absolute authority. He thought he could treat people however he wanted, and there would never be any real consequences. What Sullivan didn't understand was that every action has a reaction. Every cruel word and unfair treatment left scars on the people he encountered. Those people had families, friends, and communities. They remembered how they were treated. They lost trust in the police and in the system that was supposed to protect everyone equally. Sullivan also didn't realize that life has a way of teaching lessons to those who refuse to learn them willingly. He believed he was above it all, that his prejudices made him smart and his cruelty made him strong. But he was wrong. He was walking a path that would eventually lead him to a moment of reckoning, a moment when he would have to face the consequences of his choices in a way he never expected. As Sullivan went about his days, stopping people, writing tickets, and spreading his particular brand of injustice, he had no idea that fate was preparing something for him. He had no idea that soon, very soon, his life would depend on the kindness and professionalism of someone he had wronged. He had no idea that the universe was about to teach him a lesson he would never forget. 3 weeks had passed since Sullivan pulled over Dr. Maya Thompson on that summer evening. He had completely forgotten about the incident. For him, it was just another traffic stop, another chance to exercise his authority. He didn't think about the woman he had humiliated or how his actions had affected her. He never thought about the people he treated badly. They were just faces that came and went in his daily routine. It was a Tuesday morning, and Sullivan was starting his day the way he always did. He stopped at Bernie's Diner, a small restaurant where he ate breakfast almost every morning. The owner, Bernie, knew Sullivan's order by heart: 2 eggs over easy, bacon, hash browns, wheat toast, and black coffee. Sullivan sat in his usual booth near the window. He liked sitting there because he could watch the street and see what was going on. He opened his newspaper and started reading while he waited for his food. The diner was busy that morning, filled with the sounds of talking, laughing, and dishes clanking in the kitchen. When his breakfast arrived, Sullivan ate slowly, enjoying his meal. He was in no rush. His shift didn't start for another 30 minutes. He finished his eggs and bacon, then picked up his coffee mug to take a sip. That's when he felt it. At first, it was just a strange sensation in his chest. It felt tight, like someone was squeezing his heart with a strong hand. Sullivan put down his coffee mug and rubbed his chest, thinking maybe he had eaten too fast. But the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it got worse. The tightness became pain. The pain became agony. It felt like someone had placed a heavy weight on his chest and he couldn't breathe properly. Sullivan tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak. He reached for the table to steady himself, but his hand was shaking. "Hey, are you okay?" asked the waitress, noticing his pale face. Sullivan tried to answer, but no words came out. The pain was spreading now, moving down his left arm like fire. He felt cold sweat breaking out all over his body. His vision started to blur and the sounds in the diner seemed far away. "Something's wrong," the waitress shouted. "Someone call 911. Sullivan collapsed. One moment he was standing beside his booth and the next moment he was on the floor. His body felt heavy and strange. He couldn't control his movements. The diner erupted in panic. People rushed over to see what was happening. "Give him space," someone yelled. "Does anyone know CPR?" A man in a business suit knelt beside Sullivan. "I do. I'm calling 911 now." He pulled out his phone and dialed while checking Sullivan's pulse. 911, what's your emergency?" the operator answered. "I'm at Bernie's Diner on Oak Street. A man just collapsed. I think he's having a heart attack. He's sweating, he's pale, and he's barely conscious. We're sending an ambulance right away. Stay on the line with me." "Is he breathing?" The businessman checked. "Yes, but it's shallow. His pulse is weak." Bernie brought some pillows and placed them under Sullivan's head. "Hold on, buddy. Help is coming." Sullivan could hear the voices around him, but they sounded strange, like he was underwater. He wanted to tell them he was a police officer, that he was strong, that this couldn't be happening to him. But he couldn't speak. His body wouldn't respond to what his mind wanted it to do. Time seemed to move in a strange way. Sometimes it felt fast, and sometimes it felt very slow. Sullivan heard sirens in the distance. They got louder and louder until they were right outside the diner. Red and blue lights flashed through the window, the same lights he had used so many times to pull people over. The paramedics rushed in with their equipment. They moved quickly and professionally, asking questions while they worked. "What's his name?" one paramedic asked. "Derek Sullivan. He's a police officer," Bernie said. "He eats here every morning." The paramedics checked Sullivan's vital signs. They attached monitors to his chest. They put an oxygen mask over his face. Sullivan felt a sharp needle in his arm as they started an IV line. "Possible MI," one paramedic said to the other, using the medical term for heart attack. "Blood pressure is dropping. We need to move fast." They lifted Sullivan onto a stretcher. Everything was happening so quickly. Sullivan drifted in and out of consciousness. One moment he could see the ceiling of the diner moving above him. The next moment everything was dark. Then he was in the back of the ambulance and the paramedics were working on him, their faces serious and focused. "Stay with us, officer," one of them said. "We're taking you to Memorial Hospital. They have the best cardiac unit in the city. You're going to be okay." But Sullivan wasn't sure he would be okay. He had never felt pain like this before. He had never felt so helpless and scared. For the first time in many years, Sullivan wasn't in control. He couldn't intimidate anyone or use his authority to make things go his way. He was just a man having a heart attack, completely dependent on others to save his life. In the ambulance, the paramedics radioed ahead to the hospital. "This is Unit 7. We're bringing in a 52-year-old male, possible massive MI. Patient is in and out of consciousness. Vitals are unstable. ETA 5 minutes." At Memorial Hospital, the emergency department sprang into action. Nurses prepared a trauma bay. The cardiac catheterization lab was put on standby. The team knew they had to move fast. When it came to heart attacks, every second mattered. The longer the heart was deprived of oxygen, the more damage would occur. Sullivan felt the ambulance take a sharp turn. He heard the sirens still wailing. He wanted to tell the paramedics to turn it off, that the noise was making his head hurt, but he couldn't form the words. His body felt strange and distant, as if it wasn't really his anymore. "We're almost there, Derek," the paramedic said, holding Sullivan's hand. "Just hold on a little longer." The ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance of Memorial Hospital. The back doors flew open and Sullivan was quickly wheeled out. The morning sun was bright and Sullivan had to close his eyes against it. Then they were inside the hospital, moving down white corridors with bright lights overhead. Sullivan heard voices all around him. Doctors and nurses were calling out medical terms he didn't understand. He felt his clothes being cut away. More monitors were attached to his body. Someone was shining a light in his eyes. "Mr. Sullivan, can you hear me?" a voice asked. It was a doctor, leaning over him with a concerned expression. "You're at Memorial Hospital. You've had a heart attack. We're going to take care of you." Sullivan tried to nod, but he wasn't sure if his head actually moved. The pain in his chest was still there, constant and terrible. He had dealt with dangerous situations before in his job. He had faced armed suspects and high-speed chases, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, lying helpless on a hospital bed, his life hanging by a thread. "We need to get him to surgery now," someone said. "Page the cardiac surgeon on call. Dr. Thompson is available. She's the best we have." Sullivan heard the name, but it didn't register. He didn't make the connection. He was too focused on the pain, too scared about what was happening to him. As they wheeled him toward the operating room, Sullivan closed his eyes and hoped that whoever this Dr. Thompson was, she was really as good as they said. Because right now his life was in her hands. Dr. Maya Thompson was in her office reviewing a patient's file when her pager went off. She looked at the screen and saw the code that meant emergency surgery was needed. Her heart rate picked up slightly, the way it always did when she got these calls. Even after 8 years as a cardiac surgeon, the rush of adrenaline never completely went away. She picked up the phone and called the emergency department. "This is Dr. Thompson. I got the page. Doctor, we have a 52-year-old male with a massive heart attack. He's unstable and needs immediate surgery. We're prepping him now," the emergency room doctor explained quickly. "I'll be right there. Get the surgical team ready," Maya said. She hung up and immediately went into action mode. She grabbed her surgical cap and headed toward the operating room, her mind already going through the procedures she would need to perform. Maya was known at Memorial Hospital for being calm under pressure. While other doctors might panic or get nervous during difficult surgeries, she remained focused and steady. Her colleagues respected her not just for her skill, but for her ability to make quick, smart decisions when lives were on the line. As she walked through the hospital corridors, Maya thought about the surgery ahead. Heart attacks were always serious, but massive ones were particularly dangerous. The patient's heart muscle was dying without oxygen. Every minute that passed meant more damage. She needed to work quickly and precisely. She arrived at the surgical area and immediately started scrubbing her hands at the large sink outside the operating room. The water was warm, and she scrubbed carefully between each finger, under her nails, up her arms. This ritual always helped her focus her mind. By the time she finished scrubbing, she was completely concentrated on the task ahead. Her surgical nurse, Jennifer, helped her put on her sterile gown and gloves. "The patient is being brought in now," Jennifer said. "His vitals are not good, doctor. His blood pressure keeps dropping." "We'll stabilize him," Maya said confidently. "Get everyone in position. Is the anesthesiologist ready?" "Yes, Dr. Chen is already in there preparing." Maya walked into the operating room. It was cool and bright with large lights hanging from the ceiling. Monitors lined the walls and surgical instruments were laid out on sterile trays. Her team was already there. 2 other surgeons who would assist her, 3 nurses, the anesthesiologist, and 2 surgical technicians. "Good morning, everyone," Maya said. "We have a critical case coming in. Let's be ready to move fast once he's on the table." The team nodded. They had worked with Dr. Thompson many times before and trusted her completely. They knew she was about to save another life, just like she had saved so many others. The doors opened and the patient was wheeled in on a gurney. He was unconscious now, with tubes and wires connected to his body. The monitors showed his heart rhythm, and it wasn't good. Maya glanced at the screens, taking in the information quickly. Then she looked at the patient's face and she froze. Time seemed to stop for a moment. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. She knew this face. She knew those features. Even though his skin was pale and his expression was slack from unconsciousness, she recognized him immediately. It was Officer Sullivan, the same man who had pulled her over 3 weeks ago, the same man who had mocked her, questioned her credentials, searched her car, and humiliated her on the side of the road. The same man who had treated her like a criminal just because of the color of her skin. Maya's mind flashed back to that evening. She remembered his cold eyes, his cruel laugh, his dismissive words. She remembered standing on the sidewalk while he searched her car, feeling small and powerless. She remembered the anger and hurt she had felt driving home that night. And now here he was, unconscious on her operating table, his life completely in her hands. Jennifer noticed Maya's pause. "Dr. Thompson, are you okay?" The question brought Maya back to the present moment. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. Around her, the team was looking at her with concern. They had never seen her hesitate before. Maya looked at Sullivan's face again. Part of her felt angry. Part of her felt hurt all over again. But another part of her, the part that had spent years in medical school, the part that had taken the Hippocratic Oath, the part that truly understood what it meant to be a doctor, that part knew exactly what she had to do. "I'm fine," Maya said, her voice becoming strong and clear again. "Let's begin." She approached the operating table. Her hands were steady now, her mind focused. She had made a promise when she became a doctor. She had sworn to heal people, to preserve life, to do no harm. That oath didn't have any exceptions. It didn't say help people unless they've hurt you. It didn't say save lives unless the person doesn't deserve it. Every life was valuable in Maya's operating room. Every patient deserved her best work. It didn't matter who they were, what they had done, or how they had treated her. When someone was on her table fighting for their life, she was their best hope. And she would not let her personal feelings get in the way of that. "Scalpel," Maya said, holding out her hand. Jennifer placed the surgical instrument in her palm. Maya felt its familiar weight. She had held this tool thousands of times. It was an extension of her hand, a tool for healing. She looked down at Sullivan's chest. Somewhere under his skin, his heart was struggling, damaged and desperate for help. Maya pushed away every other thought and feeling. She pushed away the memory of that traffic stop. She pushed away the anger and the hurt. She pushed away the question of whether this man deserved her help. None of that mattered now. What mattered was the surgery. What mattered was saving a life. That was what she had trained for. That was what she was meant to do. "Vitals?" Maya asked. "Blood pressure 90/60 and dropping," Dr. Chen, the anesthesiologist, reported. "Heart rate irregular. We need to move quickly." "Then let's not waste any more time," Maya said. She positioned the scalpel and made the first incision. Her movements were precise and confident. As soon as she began cutting, everything else fell away. There was no history, no personal grudge, no memory of injustice. There was only the surgery, the patient, and her determination to save his life. The surgical team watched in admiration as Dr. Thompson worked. They didn't know about her history with this patient. They didn't know about the internal struggle she had just overcome in those few seconds of recognition. All they knew was that they were watching one of the best surgeons in the hospital do what she did best. "Retractor," Maya said, and the instrument was immediately placed in her hand. She worked methodically, opening Sullivan's chest to access his heart. Each movement was deliberate and skilled. Years of training and experience guided her hands. As Maya operated, she thought briefly about the irony of this moment. The man who had dismissed her as a fake doctor, who had questioned how she could possibly have earned her credentials, was now depending entirely on those very credentials to save his life. The man who had treated her with such contempt was now completely at her mercy. But Maya wasn't interested in revenge or in teaching him a lesson. She was interested in doing her job. She was interested in being the kind of person she had always been, someone who chose compassion over cruelty, healing over hatred, professionalism over prejudice. "Suction," she said, and the surgical technician immediately cleared the area so she could see better. Sullivan's heart was right there in front of her now, damaged but still beating weakly. Maya could see exactly what needed to be done. The blocked artery was clear on the monitor. This was going to be a long and difficult surgery, but she was ready. She had done this before, and she would do it again. "Let's save this man's life," Maya said to her team, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Dr. Maya Thompson stood over the open chest of Officer Derek Sullivan, looking directly at his struggling heart. The damage was worse than she had initially thought. The left anterior descending artery was completely blocked. This was what doctors called the widowmaker, a blockage so serious that many patients didn't survive long enough to reach the hospital. Sullivan was lucky to still be alive. "This is extensive," Maya said to her team. "We're looking at a quadruple bypass, Dr. Martinez. I'll need you to harvest the vein grafts from his leg while I prepare the heart." Dr. Martinez, one of the assisting surgeons, nodded and moved to Sullivan's leg to begin that part of the procedure. Meanwhile, Maya focused on Sullivan's heart. Despite everything this man had done to her, despite how he had treated her, she felt nothing but professional concern as she examined the organ before her. The heart was an amazing thing, Maya thought. It beat constantly throughout a person's life, pumping blood, keeping them alive. It didn't care if the person was good or bad, kind or cruel. It just kept working, doing its job until something went wrong. And when something did go wrong, it was her job to fix it. "Blood pressure is stabilizing," Dr. Chen announced from his position at the head of the operating table. "But we need to keep monitoring closely." "Good," Maya said. "Let's continue. Jennifer, I need the cardiac stabilization equipment ready." The surgery was going to be long and complicated. Maya needed to take blood vessels from Sullivan's leg and use them to create new pathways around the blocked arteries in his heart. It was like building a detour around a closed road. The blood would flow through these new paths, bringing oxygen back to the heart muscle that was starving without it. Maya worked with intense concentration. Her hands moved with practiced precision, making tiny, careful cuts and stitches. One mistake could be fatal. One slip could cause bleeding that couldn't be stopped. One wrong move could damage the heart beyond repair. But Maya didn't make mistakes. Not because she was perfect, no surgeon was, but because she had trained for this. She had spent years in medical school, years in residency, years practicing and learning and improving her skills. Every surgery she had ever performed had prepared her for moments like this. "First graft is ready," Dr. Martinez announced, bringing over the blood vessel he had harvested from Sullivan's leg. "Thank you," Maya said. She took the graft and examined it carefully. It looked healthy and strong. "This will work perfectly. Let's begin the attachment." The most delicate part of the surgery was connecting these new blood vessels to Sullivan's heart. The stitches had to be tiny and precise. The connections had to be perfect or blood would leak out. Maya used a magnifying lens to see the tiny blood vessels more clearly. Stitch by stitch, she attached the first bypass graft. Her fingers moved steadily, never shaking, never hesitating. The operating room was quiet except for the beeping of monitors and the soft sounds of breathing. Everyone was focused on their jobs, working together as one coordinated team. "First bypass is complete," Maya announced after what felt like both minutes and hours. "How are his vitals?" "Holding steady," Dr. Chen reported. "Blood oxygen levels are improving slightly." "Good. Let's move on to the second bypass." As Maya continued working, her mind wandered briefly to a memory from medical school. She remembered her professor, Dr. Williams, an older black man who had been one of the few minority surgeons at their teaching hospital. He had taken Maya under his wing, seeing in her a determination and skill that reminded him of his younger self. "You're going to face challenges that your white classmates won't face," Dr. Williams had told her one day. "Some people will doubt you because of your skin color. Some people will question whether you really earned your place here. Some people will never see past their own prejudices. How do you deal with that?" Maya had asked. Dr. Williams had smiled. "You let your work speak for itself. You become so good at what you do that no one can deny your skill. And most importantly, you never let their prejudice change who you are. You never let it make you bitter or cruel. You stay true to the oath you took. To heal, to help, to save lives. All lives. Even the lives of people who might not think you're worthy of being their doctor." Maya understood those words much better now, as she performed surgery on a man who had questioned her credentials and mocked her profession. Dr. Williams had been preparing her for moments exactly like this one. "Second bypass complete," Maya said, stepping back briefly to stretch her shoulders. She had been standing in the same position for over 2 hours now. Her back ached and her feet hurt in her surgical shoes, but she couldn't stop. Sullivan needed 2 more bypass grafts and they had to be done correctly. "Would you like to take a break, doctor?" Jennifer asked quietly. "No, we keep going," Maya said. "Time is critical. The longer we take, the more stress on his heart." She returned to her position and continued working. The third bypass graft went smoothly, connecting the new blood vessel to another blocked artery. Maya could see the difference already. The heart muscle that had been turning dark from lack of oxygen was slowly getting back its healthier color as blood began to flow again. "You're doing amazing work, Dr. Thompson." Dr. Martinez said quietly. He had been assisting her for 3 years now and had never seen her perform better than she was today. Maya didn't respond, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because she was saving Sullivan specifically, but because she was doing what she loved. Despite all the challenges she had faced in her career, despite the discrimination and the doubters, she had achieved her dream. She was a cardiac surgeon, one of the best in the hospital, and no one could take that away from her. The fourth and final bypass was the most difficult. The artery was in a tricky position, partially hidden by other tissue. Maya had to be extra careful not to damage anything else while she worked. She took her time, making sure every stitch was perfect. "Almost there," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Just a little more. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the last stitch was in place. Maya stepped back and examined her work. All 4 bypass grafts were in position, creating new pathways for blood to flow around the blockages. Sullivan's heart was still beating weakly, but now it had a chance to recover. "Let's close him up," Maya said. "Dr. Martinez, you can handle the chest closure. I want to monitor his heart activity for a few more minutes." While Dr. Martinez began the process of closing Sullivan's chest, Maya watched the monitors carefully. The heart rhythm was becoming stronger and more regular. Blood pressure was stabilizing. Oxygen levels were improving. All the signs pointed to a successful surgery. Maya felt exhausted but also deeply satisfied. She had just spent 6 hours performing one of the most complex surgeries possible. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and she was hungry and thirsty. But she had done it. She had saved a life. As the team finished closing the incision and preparing Sullivan to be moved to the intensive care unit, Maya thought about what would happen when he woke up. Would he remember her? Would he recognize her as the woman he had humiliated 3 weeks ago? Would he be grateful? Or would his prejudices be too deep for him to appreciate what she had done? Maya decided it didn't matter. She hadn't saved Sullivan's life to earn his gratitude or to teach him a lesson. She had saved his life because that was her job, her calling, her purpose. She was a healer and he had needed healing. It was as simple as that. "Good work, everyone," Maya said to her team as Sullivan was wheeled out toward the ICU. "That was a difficult surgery, and you all performed excellently." The team smiled, relieved that the operation was over and that it had been successful. They began cleaning up the operating room, preparing it for the next surgery that would inevitably come. Maya removed her surgical gown and gloves, disposing of them in the appropriate bins. She washed her hands thoroughly at the sink, watching the water run over her tired fingers. In the mirror above the sink, she caught a glimpse of her own face. She looked tired, but there was something else there too, a quiet strength, a deep sense of purpose. She had faced one of life's ultimate tests today. She had been given power over someone who had wronged her, someone who had treated her with cruelty and contempt. She could have done the minimum, could have let her emotions affect her judgment. But she hadn't. She had given Sullivan her best work, the same work she would have given anyone else. As Maya left the operating room and headed to her office to write up her surgical notes, she felt at peace with her decision. She had chosen compassion over revenge, professionalism over personal feelings, healing over hatred. And in doing so, she had proven something important. Not to Sullivan, not to anyone else, but to herself. She had proven that she was exactly the kind of doctor she had always wanted to be. Everything was dark and confusing. Sullivan felt like he was floating somewhere between sleep and waking, between dreams and reality. Sometimes he heard voices, but they sounded far away and unclear. Sometimes he felt pain in his chest, dull and constant. Sometimes he felt nothing at all. Slowly, very slowly, Sullivan began to wake up. The darkness started to fade, replaced by dim light. He tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids felt heavy, like they had weights attached to them. Finally, after what seemed like a long struggle, he managed to open them just a little. The light was too bright. Sullivan closed his eyes again and waited. He tried to remember where he was and what had happened. The last thing he clearly remembered was sitting in Bernie's diner, drinking his coffee. After that, everything was fuzzy and unclear. He tried again to open his eyes, and this time the light didn't hurt as much. He could see a white ceiling with fluorescent lights. There was a beeping sound nearby, steady and rhythmic. He turned his head slightly and saw machines and monitors next to his bed. His mouth felt dry and his throat hurt. Where was he? What had happened? A nurse noticed he was awake and quickly came to his bedside. "Mr. Sullivan?"
Can you hear me?
she asked in a gentle voice. Sullivan tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Only a small croaking sound came out. "It's okay, don't try to talk yet," the nurse said. She adjusted something on one of the machines. "You're in the hospital. You're in the intensive care unit. Do you remember what happened?" Sullivan tried to think, but his mind felt foggy. He shook his head slightly, which made him dizzy. "You had a heart attack," the nurse explained. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. You had emergency surgery. You're going to be okay, but you need to rest." A heart attack? Surgery? Sullivan couldn't believe it. He had always been healthy and strong. He worked out regularly. How could this happen to him? "Who?" Sullivan tried to speak again. This time his voice worked a little better, though it sounded rough and weak. "Who did the surgery?" "Dr. Thompson," the nurse said with a smile. "She's one of our best cardiac surgeons. You're very lucky she was on call when you came in. She saved your life." The name didn't mean anything to Sullivan at first. His brain was still foggy from the medication and the trauma his body had been through. He closed his eyes and tried to rest like the nurse had told him to. Over the next few hours, Sullivan slowly became more aware of his surroundings. He learned that he was connected to several machines that were monitoring his heart. He had tubes and wires attached to his body. His chest hurt terribly, and he could feel bandages covering a long incision. Every breath was painful. The nurse gave him small pieces of ice to suck on because he couldn't drink water yet. She checked his vital signs every hour and made notes on a chart. Other medical staff came and went, checking on him and adjusting his medications. It was late afternoon when Dr. Maya Thompson came to check on her patient. She was making her rounds, visiting all the patients she had operated on in the past week. Sullivan's name was on her list, and though she had been dreading this moment, she knew she had to do it. It was part of her job as his surgeon. Maya took a deep breath before entering Sullivan's room. She had her medical chart in her hand and a professional expression on her face. No matter what happened next, she would remain calm and professional. That was who she was. She pushed open the door and walked into the room. Sullivan was awake, staring at the ceiling. He turned his head when he heard someone enter. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Maya watched Sullivan's face carefully. She saw confusion first, then recognition, then shock. His eyes grew wide and his mouth opened slightly. "You," Sullivan whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. Maya stood at the foot of his bed, holding the chart against her chest. "Hello, Mr. Sullivan. I'm Dr. Thompson. I'm the surgeon who performed your operation." Sullivan stared at her in disbelief. He remembered her face. He remembered that traffic stop 3 weeks ago. He remembered pulling her over, searching her car, mocking her credentials, giving her that unfair ticket. He remembered laughing at her, treating her like she was nothing. And now she was standing in his hospital room telling him she was his surgeon. The same woman whose medical license he had called fake. The same woman he had humiliated and dismissed. She had operated on him. She had held his life in her hands. I don't understand," Sullivan managed to say. His heart monitor started beeping faster as his anxiety increased. "Please try to stay calm," Maya said in her professional doctor voice. "Getting upset is not good for your heart right now." She walked closer to his bed and pulled up a chair. She sat down and opened his chart, looking at it even though she had already memorized all the information. "You suffered a massive heart attack 3 days ago," Maya explained calmly. "You had a complete blockage of your left anterior descending artery. In addition, you had significant blockages in 3 other arteries. I performed a quadruple bypass surgery. We took blood vessels from your leg and used them to create new pathways around the blockages in your heart." Sullivan listened, but he was still trying to process the fact that she was his doctor. The woman he had treated so badly had saved his life. "The surgery took 6 hours," Maya continued. "It was complicated, but it went well. You're going to need several weeks of recovery, and you'll have to make some lifestyle changes. But you should make a full recovery if you follow the treatment plan." "Why?" Sullivan suddenly asked. His voice was stronger now, filled with emotion. "Why did you help me?" Maya looked up from the chart and met his eyes. This was the question she had been expecting. She had thought about how to answer it during the 3 days he had been unconscious. "Because that's what doctors do," she said simply. "We save lives. All lives." Sullivan felt tears beginning to form in his eyes. He tried to fight them back, but he couldn't. He had been so wrong about her. So completely terribly wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Maya nodded, acknowledging his apology. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Sullivan. But right now, what's most important is your recovery. You've been through major surgery and you need to focus on getting better. You should have let me die, Sullivan said, his voice breaking. After what I did to you, you should have just let me die. No, Maya said firmly. That's not who I am. I took an oath to preserve life and to do no harm. That oath doesn't have exceptions. It doesn't matter what you did or who you are. When you were on my operating table, you were my patient and I did everything I could to save you. Sullivan turned his head away, unable to look at her. The shame he felt was overwhelming. He had spent years believing he was better than people like her. He had used his badge and his authority to make others feel small. And now this woman, whom he had treated with such contempt, had saved his life with skill and compassion he couldn't even imagine possessing himself. Your vitals are stable, Maya said, standing up. I'll be checking on you every day until you're discharged. If you have any questions or concerns, you can have the nurses page me. In the meantime, get some rest. Your body needs time to heal. She turned to leave, but Sullivan called out weakly, Dr. Thompson? Maya stopped and looked back at him. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude and deep remorse. Thank you for saving my life. I didn't deserve it, but thank you. Maya gave him a small professional nod. You're welcome, Mr. Sullivan. I hope your recovery goes smoothly. She left the room, closing the door quietly behind her. In the hallway, Maya allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply. That had been harder than she expected. Seeing Sullivan's face, hearing his apology, watching him realize the full weight of what had happened. It had stirred up emotions she thought she had put away. But she had done the right thing. She knew that with absolute certainty. She had proven that her character was stronger than his prejudice. She had shown that compassion could triumph over cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, she had given Sullivan a chance to become a better person. In his hospital bed, Sullivan lay alone with his thoughts. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. He stared at the ceiling and thought about his life, his choices, his beliefs. Everything he had thought he knew about himself and others had been turned upside down. A black woman doctor, whose credentials he had mocked and whose dignity he had trampled, had saved his life. She had given him her best work, her skill, her care. She had treated him with more humanity than he had ever shown her. Sullivan closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, he felt truly ashamed of who he had been. But along with that shame came something else, a small spark of hope that maybe he could change. Maybe he could become a different person. Maybe this second chance at life could also be a second chance to be better. The tears finally came, rolling down his cheeks onto the hospital pillow. They were tears of shame, yes, but also tears of gratitude and the beginning of genuine remorse. Sullivan knew his road ahead would be long, not just his physical recovery, but his journey to becoming the kind of person who deserved the mercy he had been shown. The days in the hospital passed slowly for Sullivan. Each morning he woke up to the sound of beeping monitors and the sight of white walls. The pain in his chest was a constant reminder of what had happened. But more painful than his physical wounds was the mental and emotional struggle he was going through. Every time Dr. Thompson came to check on him, Sullivan felt the weight of his shame grow heavier. She was always professional and kind, asking about his pain levels, checking his incisions, explaining his recovery process. She treated him with respect and care, just like she would treat any other patient, and that made everything worse because Sullivan knew he hadn't treated her with even a fraction of that respect. During his second week in the hospital, Sullivan asked the nurse if he could speak with Dr. Thompson privately. It wasn't about his medical condition. He needed to talk to her, really talk to her if she was willing to listen. Maya agreed to meet with him that afternoon. When she arrived, Sullivan was sitting up in bed looking more alert than he had in days. His color was better and his vital signs had been improving steadily. You wanted to see me? Maya asked, pulling up a chair beside his bed. Sullivan took a deep breath. Dr. Thompson, I need to apologize to you properly. What I said in this room a few days ago wasn't enough. I need you to know that I understand how wrong I was. Not just that one night when I pulled you over, but my whole attitude, my whole way of thinking about people. Maya listened quietly, her face calm and composed. I've had a lot of time to think while lying here, Sullivan continued. I've been a police officer for 12 years and I thought I was doing good work. But the truth is, I was hurting people. I was treating people unfairly because of the color of their skin. I was using my badge as an excuse to act on my prejudices. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. You could have done the minimum during that surgery. You could have just done enough to keep me alive. But you didn't. You gave me your best work. You gave me the same care you would give anyone else. And that has changed something in me. Maya nodded slowly. I appreciate your apology, Mr. Sullivan, and I'm glad you're reflecting on these things. But words are easy. The real question is what you're going to do when you leave this hospital. I know, Sullivan said quickly, and I've been thinking about that too. I want to do something. I want to make things right, or at least start trying to. True to his word, Sullivan took action as soon as he was strong enough. While still recovering in the hospital, he requested a meeting with the police chief and a representative from the Internal Affairs Department. They came to his room surprised by his urgent request. I need to make a formal statement, Sullivan told them. I need to report my own misconduct. The police chief and the Internal Affairs officer exchanged glances, unsure what to expect. For the next 2 hours, Sullivan detailed his history of discriminatory behavior. He talked about the stops he had made that weren't justified. He admitted to searches that had no legal basis. He described the way he had treated people differently based on their race. He named dates, locations, and incidents that he could remember. I know this might end my career, Sullivan said, and honestly, maybe it should. But I can't keep living with this. I can't keep being the person I was. The police chief was quiet for a long moment. This is unexpected, Sullivan. We'll need to investigate all of this thoroughly. You understand that there will be consequences? I understand, Sullivan said, and I accept them. After 3 weeks in the hospital, Sullivan was finally discharged. Dr. Thompson gave him detailed instructions about his recovery. He would need to attend cardiac rehabilitation, take medications, change his diet, and avoid stress. She also referred him to a counselor to help with the emotional aspects of recovering from a heart attack. Take care of yourself, Mr. Sullivan, Maya said at their final meeting. You've been given a second chance. Make the most of it. I will, Sullivan promised. And Dr. Thompson, thank you for everything. The investigation into Sullivan's conduct took several months. Many people he had wronged were contacted and interviewed. The department found that his self-reported incidents matched numerous complaints that had been filed over the years. Some complaints had been dismissed too quickly. Others had never been properly investigated. The department offered Sullivan early retirement instead of firing him. He accepted. His pension would be reduced, but he would still have income. More importantly, he would no longer be in a position where he could hurt anyone with his authority. But Sullivan didn't just retire and disappear. He began reaching out to community organizations, offering to speak about his experiences. At first, people were suspicious. They thought it might be some kind of publicity stunt or a way to make himself look better. The first time Sullivan spoke at a community forum, the room was tense. He stood in front of about 50 people, many of them from minority communities that had experienced police discrimination. His hands were shaking and his heart was beating fast, though this time from nervousness, not a heart attack. My name is Derek Sullivan, he began. I was a police officer for 12 years, and for most of those 12 years I was part of the problem. He told them his story. He told them about his prejudices, about the people he had hurt, about the traffic stop with Dr. Thompson. He told them about his heart attack and waking up to discover that the woman he had mocked and humiliated had saved his life. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, Sullivan said. I know that many of you have been hurt by officers like me. Some of you might have been hurt by me personally. I'm here to tell you that you were right to complain, right to be angry, right to demand better. And I'm here to tell other officers that this kind of behavior needs to stop. The questions from the audience were tough. People wanted to know why he had treated others so badly. They wanted to know if he really had changed or if this was just an act. They challenged him on specific incidents and policies. Sullivan answered as honestly as he could. When he didn't know something, he said so. When he had been wrong, he admitted it. He didn't try to make excuses or defend his past behavior. After that first forum, Sullivan continued speaking at schools, churches, and community centers. He worked with the police department to develop better training programs on implicit bias. He shared his story with other officers, hoping to reach them before they made the same mistakes he had made. It wasn't easy. Many people didn't trust him. Some people thought he was just trying to repair his reputation. Others were angry that he was getting attention for finally doing what he should have been doing all along. But Sullivan kept at it. He understood that his words alone weren't enough. He needed to back them up with actions and consistency over time. He volunteered at youth centers in neighborhoods he had once patrolled with suspicion and hostility. He listened to people's stories about their experiences with police. He learned about the history of discrimination that he had never bothered to learn before. Dr. Maya Thompson watched Sullivan's transformation from a distance. She read about his speaking engagements in the newspaper. She heard from colleagues that he was working with the hospital to develop training for emergency responders on treating all patients with dignity and respect. She never spoke publicly about what had happened between them. That was Sullivan's story to tell, not hers. She continued her work at Memorial Hospital, performing surgeries and saving lives. Her reputation continued to grow, not just for her surgical skill, but for her integrity and compassion. 1 year after the surgery, Sullivan attended a medical conference where Dr. Thompson was giving a presentation on cardiac surgery techniques. He sat in the back of the room, listening to her speak with authority and knowledge to a room full of doctors. The contrast between this moment and that night he had pulled her over was almost too much to bear. After her presentation, Sullivan approached her during the break. "Dr. Thompson," he said quietly, "I just wanted to let you know that I've been trying to do better, to be better." Maya smiled slightly. "I've heard. I'm glad you're following through on your commitment to change." "I could never thank you enough," Sullivan said, "not just for saving my life, but for showing me what real character looks like. You had every reason to be angry with me, to treat me poorly, to give me less than your best. But you didn't. You chose compassion, and that choice changed my life." "We all have choices to make about who we want to be," Maya said. "I chose to be the doctor I promised to be. You're choosing to be a better person than you were. Those are both important choices." Sullivan nodded. "If there's ever anything I can do to help your work or your community, please let me know. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying." "Just keep doing what you're doing," Maya said. "Keep speaking truth about your experiences. Keep working for change. That's how you make amends." 2 years after his heart attack, Sullivan had become a recognized voice in discussions about police reform and implicit bias. He had spoken at over 100 events. He had trained thousands of officers. He had helped develop new policies and procedures aimed at reducing discriminatory policing. His family had noticed the change in him too. His sister started inviting him to family gatherings again. His brother told him he was proud of the work he was doing. Even his elderly mother, who had been embarrassed by the circumstances of his retirement, began to see that something positive had come from it all. Sullivan's health continued to improve. He followed Dr. Thompson's instructions carefully. He attended all his cardiac rehabilitation sessions. He changed his diet and started exercising regularly. But the biggest health improvement wasn't physical. It was the weight that had been lifted from his conscience. Dr. Maya Thompson continued to excel in her career. She was promoted to head of cardiac surgery at Memorial Hospital. She received awards for her work and her contributions to medicine. Medical students sought her out as a mentor, drawn by her skill and her reputation for integrity. She never forgot what had happened with Sullivan, but she didn't dwell on it either. It had been a test of her character, and she had passed. That was enough. She had proven to herself that she could live up to the oath she had taken, even in the most difficult circumstances. The story of Sullivan and Dr. Thompson became known in their city. Though not everyone knew all the details, it became a story people told about redemption and forgiveness, about character and change, about how one moment of mercy could transform a life. For Sullivan, every day was a reminder of the second chance he had been given. Every morning when he woke up, he was grateful to be alive. And he was grateful that Dr. Thompson had chosen compassion over revenge, healing over hatred. For Maya, the experience reinforced what she had always believed, that healing was more powerful than hurt, that professionalism mattered more than personal feelings, and that every life had value, regardless of who that person was or what they had done. Years later, when people asked Sullivan about the moment that changed his life, he would always tell them the same thing. "I was saved twice," he would say. "Once on the operating table, when a brilliant surgeon repaired my broken heart, and once in the days that followed, when that same surgeon showed me what it means to truly live up to your principles." Dr. Thompson didn't just save my life, she showed me how to live it better. And when people asked Maya about that same moment, she would smile and say simply, "I did my job. That's what doctors do. We heal people, all people. That's the promise we make, and it's a promise worth keeping." Their paths didn't cross often after that. They lived separate lives, pursuing their separate callings. But they were forever connected by that night in the operating room, when compassion triumphed over prejudice, when skill met grace, and when one person's choice to do the right thing changed two lives forever.